In the bustling city of Detroit, a hidden chapter of history whispers from the shadows of modern skyscrapers. A street that once glittered with the wealth of Detroit's most affluent is now a faded memory in the city's turbulent past. This is the story of Millionaires Row, a tale that takes us back in time to when Detroit was more than just a motor city. A time when it was a canvas for the dreams of the rich and powerful. But how did this symbol of prosperity crumble into near oblivion? What secrets lie behind the rise and fall of this once magnificent avenue? Today, as one walks through the streets of Brush Park, it's impossible not to feel a deep sense of sorrow for what has been lost. The air, once filled with the laughter and chatter of Detroit's elite, now carries a silence, broken only by the occasional sound of renovation and construction. The streets, where horse-drawn carriages once roamed, are now lined with grand mansions, many of which, with their boarded-up windows, remind us that wealth doesn't last forever, and how quickly human efforts can fade away. The well-kept gardens are now overgrown, and the creaky gates lead only to empty halls and shattered dreams. In this grim setting, the spectre of poverty looms, making it hard for the area to rise yet again from its ashes. But let's not get ahead of ourselves for now. We will begin our story from the very start. The birth of a neighborhood. Brush Park's story, later to be known as Millionaires Row, began in the 1850s, when entrepreneur Edmund Brush, son of Elijah Brush, Detroit's second mayor, decided to turn his family's land into a special neighborhood. This land was not far from downtown Detroit, making it a perfect spot for the city's rich and important people to build their homes. So, Edmund, with a clear plan, named the streets after his family members, like Alfred, Adelaide, and Edmund. This was his way of leaving a mark, a personal touch to the neighborhood. Also, he sold pieces of his land to wealthy families who were not just looking for a place to live, but were looking for a place to show how well they had done in life. Brush Park thus quickly became the place to be for Detroit's elite. It was like a club, but instead of a membership card, you needed a grand house on one of its streets. The houses in Brush Park were masterpieces. Each one was designed to be unique and luxurious. The architects who worked on these houses were some of the best. They included names like Henry T. Brush, George D. Mason, and Albert Kahn. These architects turned Brush Park into a gallery of different styles, from Victorian to French Renaissance. The houses were big, with many rooms and fancy designs on the outside. They had towers, big windows, and lots of decorations. It was like each house was trying to tell its own story. One of the most famous houses was the William Livingston House, a French Renaissance-style mansion designed by Albert Kahn in 1894. Livingston, a significant figure in Detroit's banking and shipping industries, lived in this opulent home that reflected his success. This house was special because it was one of Kahn's first big projects. It stood out with its elegant design and detailed work. People would walk by just to look at it. Unfortunately, this architectural gem was demolished in 2007, but its legacy remains part of Brush Park's rich history. Then there was the Ransom Gillis House, a Venetian Gothic marvel designed by Henry T. Brush. It was the residence of businessman Ransom Gillis, a prominent figure in Detroit society after the Civil War. The residence of John Pridgeon Jr., built in 1868 by architect Gordon W. Lloyd, was another highlight of Brush Park. Pridgeon, a prominent Detroit mayor, lived in this mansion that showcased the affluence and prestige of its owner. The house's demolition in the 1890s marked the end of an era, but left an indelible mark on the neighborhood's history. a community of notables. However, it wasn't just the residences there. Brush Park, during its golden age, was also a gathering place for some of the most influential people in Detroit. Among the most notable residents, apart from the one we've already talked about, were David Whitney Jr., a name synonymous with success in the lumber industry, and Joseph L. Hudson, the man behind the famous department store. The neighborhood was also home to bankers, merchants, and manufacturers who made their fortunes in the booming economy of Detroit. Each of these individuals brought their unique contributions to the city, whether it was through business, philanthropy, or civic engagement. So, living in Brush Park was a statement. It meant you had achieved a level of success that few could dream of. The residents took pride in their community, and their contributions to the city were evident in the growth and development that Detroit experienced during this time. As we delve deeper into this fascinating tale, we invite you to become a more active part of this journey. If you're finding value in this video, please consider subscribing and sharing this content. Your support is crucial in helping us continue to uncover and share these compelling stories. The atmosphere of the era. The atmosphere in Brush Park during its heyday was electric. The mornings in Brush Park would start with the soft clip-clop of horses as the city's elite set off for their day, whether it was to manage businesses, attend events, or simply take a leisurely ride around the neighborhood. As the day progressed, the streets would become busier. The residents, dressed in the fashion of the time, would take strolls, greeting their neighbors and discussing the latest news. Regardless of the time, though, the neighborhood had an air of exclusivity. It was a place where the elite of Detroit came together, not just to live, but to celebrate life. Social gatherings and parties in Brush Park were grand affairs, attended by the crème de la crème of society. While the mansions themselves served as perfect backdrops for these events, with their spacious ballrooms and elegant gardens, their gardens were meticulously maintained, adding a touch of greenery and nature to urban landscape. The scent of blooming flowers mingled with the fresh air, creating an almost idyllic setting amidst the bustling city. In the evenings, the gaslit streets of Brush Park took on a magical quality, with the soft glow of the lights casting shadows on the cobblestone roads. The place was also a center of culture and sophistication. The residents were patrons of the arts, and their homes often housed collections of fine art and antiques. Music filled the halls of these mansions, with private concerts and recitals being a common occurrence. For the children of Brush Park, the neighborhood was a playground of luxury. They grew up in an environment of affluence, attending the best schools and participating in high society events. Brush Park was a bubble of wealth and privilege, a world unto itself, separate from the rest of Detroit. A shift in living patterns. Before cars, living in places like Brush Park was the norm, but as cars became more common, they changed how people thought about where to live. Suddenly, living far from the busy city center wasn't a problem anymore. Cars made it easy to travel longer distances quickly. This new freedom meant that the wealthy could move to quieter, more spacious areas, like Rosedale Park, leaving behind the crowded city life. But cars didn't just change where people lived. They transformed how the whole city worked. After the wealthy residents moved out of Brush Park, the neighborhood went through a lot of changes. The big, fancy houses that used to be homes to Detroit's richest people started to lose their charm. Many of these houses were turned into apartments. By 1921, every single house on Alfred Street, one of the main streets in Brush Park, had been changed into an apartment building. The beautiful old houses that remained started to look old and not cared for. Some of them even had stores built right in front of them. It was a big change from the days when Brush Park was known as the best place to live in Detroit. One of the most famous houses in Brush Park, the Ransom Gillis house, like the other houses in the neighborhood, also got old and wasn't taken care of. By the 1970s, Alfred Street, where the Ransom Gillis house and other big houses were, looked very different. Most of the old houses were gone, and the street was mostly empty. Today, Brush Park is also at the center of various other developmental projects aimed at revitalizing the area. One notable development is the completion of the Brush-Watson project, which has added nearly 100 units of new affordable housing to Brush Park. This initiative is a significant step towards making the neighborhood more inclusive and accessible, especially for those seeking affordable living options in the heart of Detroit. The Brush Park Community Development Corporation, or CDC, also aims for multi-family residential developments at 84 Edmund Place and 269 Winder, as well as at the historic rehabilitation of 421 Watson. Additionally, the Brush Park South project on Brush Street between I-75 and Adelaide is another key development. It includes new condominiums and the restoration of older mansions. However, as we reflect on the history of Millionaires Row, one question lingers. What does the future hold for historic neighborhoods like Brush Park? Will the efforts to blend the old with the new create a sustainable model for urban revitalization? Or will the ghosts of the past continue to haunt these spaces?